Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman, and today's episode is an excerpt from my recent workshop that I gave online on January 15th, 2024, called How to Get Rid of Cravings so that you can feel in control around food without feeling deprived or restricted. Now, you may not think that's even possible because you may imagine that when you cut sugar or your favorite comfort foods, that of course you're going to feel deprived or restricted. But I'd like you to be open to a different way of seeing things. A mindset shift, if you will, or as I call it, a reframe. And in today's episode, I'll be giving you an example from this online workshop of how to reframe and how to bust a common myth that we need to eat everything in moderation. We'll get to that myth busting in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources about how to get rid of cravings, then I have plenty for you. First, download my 5 tips to get rid of cravings. And those 5 tips may not be what you think they are. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. And come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life, even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_lifeaftersugar. All right, so are you ready to do a little bit of myth busting and reframing? Because that's exactly what we were doing in the recent online interactive workshop that I gave called How to Get Rid of Cravings so that you can feel in control around food without feeling deprived or restricted. So you'll be hearing what I have to say about the matter and also what the participants had to say in the chat in this episode. So welcome. This workshop is for you, and if you want to eat healthy or you're already eating healthy, but you get derailed by cravings whenever you're tired or stressed or emotional or bored, or when you're on vacation or at a social event or when you have company. And it's for you if you don't seem to be able to lose those extra pounds like you used to in your 30s and 40s. And it's also for you if you've tried all the diets, even intermittent fasting, but you're struggling to be consistent and maybe you feel frustrated, uncomfortable, stuck, hopeless. And if you still have your parents who are alive, maybe you're looking at your aging parents and you don't want to end up sick like them, and you're trying so hard, but you just can't figure out what it is that works for your body at this time of your life. So if cravings are derailing you, and if certain types of foods and situations are triggering your cravings, and then you give in to your cravings, and you feel ashamed and frustrated and guilty and hopeless and out of control and uncomfortable, well, can you relate? Does this sound a bit like your lived experience? Can you tell me in the chat if you can relate? Just a yes or a no? Because I'm pretty sure that if you're here, a lot of this resonates with you. Oh yeah, I'm getting a lot of yeses. Oh, yeah. 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 I get it totally. And so this workshop is for you if you can relate to the description that I just gave. And I want to reassure you that all of these feelings, it's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing you did that makes it your fault. You're not weak or broken in any way. It's just that we've been given some false information over the years, and that false information about cravings, about food, about sugar in particular, has made us feeling ashamed and bad about having cravings in the first place and not being able to deal with them. And I want to tell you today in this workshop, it's not your fault. Do you know who I blame? I blame the diet culture for one thing that has given us this, in my opinion, false sense of security by telling us, oh, yeah, you can balance the good food and the bad food, let alone putting food into groups of good and bad. And when we can't balance that, we feel like it's our fault. I also blame the processed foods industry for making us believe that what they sell is actually food. And so we're going to look a little bit deeper into that in the workshop today. And the other thing that kind of makes me frustrated with the diet culture is that it tends to make us focus solely on our weight. And the problem with that is that whatever diet we go on, it's short term, or we have a short term view of it. It's definitely unsustainable, and it focuses on the food instead of focusing on you. And what I want to do today in this workshop is to focus on you way more than just on eat this, eat that, don't eat this, don't eat that on the food. Again, it's not your fault. I promise you. It's not your fault if you are feeling or if you are struggling with cravings. So that's why today I want to do a bit of myth busting for you. It's one of my fun, it's like kind of like fun for me to myth bust, and I hope it is for you, because we have been given a whole bunch of myths over the years, one of which we'll be going into today, which is that you can eat everything in moderation. It sounds lovely. We wish it were true. If you're here, you're probably like, yeah, I should be strong enough to eat everything in moderation. But the fact is, most of us, here at least, can't eat everything in moderation, sugar especially. And we've been told that we should be able to, either by some kind of food pyramid or some healthy plate, or even like doctors, nutritionists, and so on. Not that I have anything against health professionals or nutrition experts, not at all. It's just that when we feel that we should be able to eat everything in moderation and we can't, then we feel like we're broken in some way. At least I did. And so I want to bust that myth that you can eat everything in moderation today. It's one of the 3 myths I want to bust with you. And I want to introduce you today to the concept of reframing how you see not just sugar and food, but even your relationship with yourself. And some people call reframing like a mindset shift. I like the word reframe. And so we're going to practice some reframing. All right, let's get to the second myth here, which is everything in moderation. You need a balanced diet. Sounds lovely. And I'm going to show you now how to find your balance by rejecting the everything in moderation diet mantra that I call it. Because as I mentioned at the beginning today, it sounds wonderful that you can eat everything in moderation. Sounds brilliant. Love it. But I think it comes from the diet culture because it's so difficult to eat every single thing in moderation, because some of these foods, as we saw, are actually created to be crave-worthy. These types of foods are pretty much impossible to eat in moderation because they have been engineered not to be eaten in moderation. And so we've grown, I don't know for you, but I grew up with this message that, you can balance out the so-called good food and the so-called bad food, and that everything's hunky-dory and balanced out. And that if you're feeling unbalanced by, for example, sugar or sugary foods, then it's your fault. Like you're not trying hard enough or you don't have enough willpower. And then I used to feel, oh my God, it's my fault. I feel ashamed. I'm not strong enough. And round and round and round it goes. But I don't think the problem is you or me. I think the problem is the message. I just want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. It doesn't have to be a long review. For example, here's one from Jeline who says, "Great information, 5 stars. Thank you for sharing so much information about ways of removing sugar from your diet and the positive benefits. This podcast is very helpful and easy to listen to." Thank you, Jeline. And here's another 5-star review that simply says, "Great info. Love your podcast." So let me know your review. And what happens when you review my podcast is that it helps it climb up the charts and it kind of feeds the algorithm so that more people can discover this podcast and be inspired to begin their life after sugar. And your reviews encourage me to continue making this podcast. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar. Because there are certain foods that by their very nature unbalance us, and even a little bit unbalances us. And for some of us, myself included, where sugar's concerned, for example, the balance comes from 0 and the freedom comes from 0. And any more than 0 for myself at least, and you may be like me, unbalances me. And telling me that a little bit of everything is a balance is toxic for me to hear because it does not fit with my experience. And that comes down to maybe your natural personality. You may be more of a moderator, or you may be more like me, an abstainer, or you may be an abstainer who wishes that you were a moderator, right? Who wishes that, I wish I was strong enough to be able to just eat a little bit of this or a little bit of that without going off the rails. But the truth is that some of us can't. We have brains that are wired where only 0 gives us true freedom. And I feel so strongly about this because of my experience and the experience of many people that I've helped. I made a podcast episode 12 of the Life After Sugar podcast, where it's a gentle rant of me saying, stop telling me to eat sugar in moderation. It's toxic. It doesn't work. And so if it does work for you, good, smashing, happy for you. But for very, very many of us, hundreds of thousands of us, if not millions, that just does not work, especially where sugar is concerned. And it's about as useful as telling us to simply eat less and move more, right? Or just to indiscriminately cut calories. Where has that gotten us? Well, it's gotten us to a pretty bad obesity epidemic, that's for sure, right? And that kind of advice has also got us to diabetes rates rising. So I'm not convinced that eat everything in moderation is the best advice out there. And you may have heard this before, but I certainly have been told this before, that cutting sugar out completely, and in my case, sweeteners and flour and grains, refined grains, completely, that's too extreme. But my answer is this. First of all, it's not too extreme for me, it's freedom. Second, if sugar was that harmless, why is the World Health Organization telling us or recommending less than 10% of our total calorie intake, and ideally less than 5%? Why are so many processed foods normalized and available, and fast food chains so generalized in our society? Isn't that extreme? And the fact that these types of products and messages are so deeply ingrained into our culture, we feel deprived when just with the thought of not eating them anymore. And we may feel restricted when somebody, like I used to, told me, don't, try not eating those things for a bit, right? And so all these foods that are making us sick and fat and unhealthy, we feel, well, if I don't eat them, I'll feel deprived and restricted. It's a twisted kind of message. And it's kind of normalized now to feel that all the physical, psychological, emotional side effects of eating sugar and processed foods are also normal. Normal to have headaches, normal to have joint pain, normal to be overweight, normal to lack energy. It's all normalized. And so I'm inviting you to reframe what's normal and to reframe what food is and to reframe what balance is for you. Not what other people tell you, but what it actually is for you, how you feel balanced. And what I can tell you is that for me and many, many, many people like me, 0 is balance. And 0 means living with no more cravings, living with peace around food, with easy weight loss and less or no inflammation, with a more stable mood, with a lower risk of health conditions, with the fact that you can prevent or reverse diabetes, with better sleep, with feeling more confident and in control, and also with being a positive role model for the generations after us. This is what 0 and this is what balance is for me and very possibly for you. Here is a reframe from Ellen, who did the program a couple of years ago. In the program, I finally decided to drop added sugar and refined starches. It was my own choice, and I'm very, very energetic now. It's amazing, really, really amazing. P.S., she says, I just celebrated my 2nd year sugar and cravings free. That was the key for her. So this myth of everything in moderation and that you need a balanced diet, for some of us, that myth is busted. Here's a little homework for you, okay? If you're an abstainer like me, try 24 hours with 0 refined sugar and grains or flour starting today. Just 24 hours. And can you tell me, I'm curious, tell me in the chat, are you an abstainer like me, or do you think you might be? You don't have to be. I'm just curious. Will you commit to trying 24 hours with 0 refined sugar and grains or flour? Let's have a look. Yeah, abstainer. Yes and yes. And I'm realizing I need to be. Yeah, I tell you, Kristen, sometimes we wish we weren't, but the fact is a lot of us are. And kind of the faster we accept that about ourselves, the faster we can move forward. Yeah, and stop suffering with cravings. Yeah, abstainer, abstainer, all or nothing. Yep, I hear you. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just how we are. All right, so I hope this excerpt from the online workshop, How to Get Rid of Cravings so that you can feel in control around food without feeling deprived or restricted, has helped you to reframe how you see comfort food, sugar, and moderation in general. As we talked about on the workshop, the idea of everything in moderation is lovely. It just doesn't apply to many of us because our natural personality and the way that our brain is wired just don't allow us to moderate sugar and other highly processed food products. I don't even call them food. And if you're feeling guilty or ashamed or not strong enough or like you don't have enough willpower to moderate these highly processed products, then I'm here to tell you that it's not your fault. And as I said in the workshop, I personally blame the diet culture and especially the processed foods industry that has made us believe that these are foods and that they're part of a healthy, balanced diet when I honestly believe they're not. At least not for people like me and maybe you who feel so much freer without them. But I do realize that it's a lot easier said than done to achieve freedom from cravings. And that's why I created the 90-day program Freedom from Cravings Formula. Over 12 weeks, you'll get lots of practical, actionable strategies so that you don't need sugar as a coping skill anymore. If you're struggling with cravings, I'm here to guide you. And if you're a woman over 50 and you want to eat healthy, but you get derailed by cravings whenever you're tired or stressed or emotional or bored, or when you're on vacation or at a social event, or when you have company. And if you don't seem to be able to lose those extra pounds like you used to in your 30s and 40s, and you've tried all the diets, even intermittent fasting, but you're still struggling to be consistent, well, I'm here to help. And the Freedom from Cravings Formula 90-day program is for you because it's specifically designed for women over 50 who want to ditch cravings so that you can slim down and finally feel in control around food. All you need to do to sign up is to go to aftersugarclub.com and schedule a clarity call with me at no cost to see if the program is a good fit for you. You can also find the link in the show notes along with this episode. Go to aftersugarclub.com and schedule your free clarity call with me to see if the Freedom from Cravings formula is the right fit for you. See you soon. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.